Hello there, beautiful people. Welcome back to the channel. Today we got to talk about something. This might actually be a bit of a stale story, but I wanted to talk to you guys about this anyways. We are facing a pretty grave problem, and this one affects the women folk particularly badly. So, the premise to the story is this thing called an Equality Act. This is Nancy Pelosi, because this kind of garbage you generally expect for Democrats. I'll just read you a little bit and then we'll go into other sources. Four self-described liberal feminists said Monday that, the data is off the charts. The gender equality legislation pushed by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will jeopardize women's rights and actually promote inequality. The Equality Act, which sounds well and good, as most liberal mumbo-jumbo does, is an unmitigated disaster for women and girls. Kara Dunsky, a lawyer and board member at the Women's Liberation Front, said at an event at the Heritage Foundation featuring her and three other feminists. And the thing is, it's not possible to enshrine both gender identity in civil rights law and protect women and girls as a distinct legal category at the same time. So what's this all about? The Equality Act would add sexual orientation and gender identity characteristics protected by the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Sounds good, right? Really, really terrible. I want to make a separate video about the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I think there are certain tenets within this act that has really opened up some various avenues of attack on our society by identity politics, and this will only get worse in my estimation. So what's all this hubbub about? Well, if gender equality is added to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, this would make hospitals and doctors vulnerable to litigation if they don't follow the medical recommendations of the transgender movement, as Emily Cow, director of Heritage's DeVos Center for Religion and Civil Society, put it in a recent op-ed. So here's the thing. This would make the Medical Association follow the medical recommendations of the transgender movement. The key here, recommendations of the transgender movement. So this is an SJW power play. It's not it's not something that the medical community produced organically, but something that they got forced into. And of course, the implications of this is not limited to the medical community. Things like this will happen more often. Oxford ends women's only fellowship after university rules that it breaches equality law. So what's this? There was an archaeologist. He set up a scholarship exclusively for women to honor his dead wife. Well, that's no longer here. The Joan Randall McAveer Jr. Fellowship, established in 1930s for women studying fine arts, music, and literature, was deemed to be discriminatory on the grounds of gender. Yeah. Now, for things like scholarship, I'm not really a fan of affirmative action things, so you can debate as to whether, you should have women-only or minority-only scholarships and stuff like that. But this goes far beyond. This goes into sports. Women can identify as men, and men can identify as women, and kick the shit out of women in contact sports, and also strip titles away from them in every other sports. And there was a rumor that was I'd say rumor to push the left-wing narrative, but the left says there's a rumor that men are getting into women's prison and single-sex women-exclusive facilities and sexually assaulting them. Is that rumor a right-wing conspiracy? Is it true? Well, let's take a look at left-wing fact-checker Snopes. Did a male rapist who identifies as a female transfer to women's jail and assault female inmates? Snopes deems it to be claim. Oh, let's read the claim first. Transgender prisoner Karen White, formerly Stephen Woods of West Yorkshire, England, who confessed to committing multiple rapes as a man, sexually assaulted female inmates after being jailed to a women's jail. This is true. This is true. Now, by the way, this seems like something that would happen in England, because those guys are further down the social justice rabbit hole than we are. But it's happening in multiple places. And this whole equality gender thingy is taking a turn that women are really getting a black eye. This lady was on Tucker a few days ago.
Many people would in their hearts think is obvious, but very few people are willing to say out loud. You said it knowing you would likely be punished for saying it, but you said it anyway. Why did you do that?
I believe in the truth. I believe that people should have these conversations and say things that matter without fear of.
Before getting into the story, I had to interject. So she got kicked of the Baltimore LGBT committee. I did a little bit of a digging, and you guys are willing to investigate and let me know if I'm accurate or not. But the Baltimore LGBT committee, I don't know if she was a founder, but she was the only lesbian in that committee. I think she might have been the only gay person in that committee. Basically, the LGBT committee kicked off the only gay person in their committee. Ironic, yes. Not unexpected, given how intersectional politics works.
Punishment.
You are old-fashioned. Why do you think, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm grateful that you have that attitude, but why do you think it was important to say this specifically?
Well, when we get down to it, women and girls all share a biological reality. We are all female. But if any male person can call himself a woman or legally identify as female, then predatory men.
Do you guys see this beautiful hot number over here? Without going into too much details because this is very confusing, but this ma'am has a very similar story to this other ma'am.
Will do so in order to gain access to women's single-sex spaces, and this puts every woman and girl at risk.
That's from the beginning. I don't weigh in on this often because sexual politics is a morass, and it's not worth it, to be totally honest with you. But I have enough daughters that I care, and my instinct has always been this change in our society, which we never debated, the terms have never been clarified, is not going to be good for girls in the long run. Do you share that concern?
I definitely do agree. Like I said, this puts every woman and girl at risk of male violence, and this is already happening in many states. In many states, men can legally identify themselves as female and gain access to women's single-sex spaces. And sports is just one institution where men are taking titles, scholarships, and this is a problem.
So I'm not going to play this whole thing. You guys can check this out. It's really sad. And as you can tell, she displays some really bigoted Nazi-esque views, or as some of us would describe as common sense. Now, while most people on the right, including myself, do enjoy segments of the left eating each other, this is particularly concerning. If you have a daughter who likes playing contact sports, if you have a daughter who is applying for a scholarship that she has an eye on, if your daughter is applying for, I don't know, anything that's reserved for women, this should be really worrying for you because a lot of the times the people on the left would say, okay, the social justice crazy, it's coming from a very shrill, loud minority of people in the population. They do not dominate the mainstream left. They're not everybody. And I think there is a amount of truth to that statement. That being said, whether they're the minority or whether they're the majority really doesn't matter because these guys are really powerful. Maybe they're 1% of the entire Western left or the entire American left, but it turns out their 1% is probably the vast majority of people in power. We're talking about lobbying groups, we're talking about administrators, we're talking about lawyers. So this should be very, very worrying. And as far as all you women and lesbians and gays out there that really push this intersectionality thing, once again, the rest of the population has to interfere and clean up your mess. But I hope you all are proud. Man, talk about it's just stupid that misogynists such as myself have to worry about women's rights apparently. So that's the story, you guys. Do read up on this a little bit on your own. This is particularly disturbing. And when I say read up on this, there are so many cases of men abusing this new intersectionality, LGBT. I've done a few videos of men doing it in sports because I think as long as it's in sports, it is still sad, but there's a comic element to it. But if there are cases of men doing it with this whole stunt for prisons, transferring into women's prisons, transferring into women's shelters, and the story not ending well. So I would encourage you guys to embark upon that horror element yourself. And things are not looking good. Things are not looking good. Well, let me know what you guys think. I will talk to you guys later.